Hey everybody, welcome to another Ask Professor Paranormal with myself, Lloyd Auerbach, here to answer questions for you and talk about, just generally any topics you'd like to kind of discuss a little bit. I see Safina and Jody and Paul, thanks for joining, some of my regulars. I'm sure we'll have some other folks joining as we go along. And yeah, do definitely say hello to each other. Kathy Nadal is with us, one of our great Forever Family Foundation mediums. So uh, I'll just just remind everybody. I'll do this again at the end for those of you who are regulars that we're going to be skipping 3 weeks, not 2 weeks, for the next session. The next one I'll be doing, next show will be on September 14th, and then looking at my travel schedule for the rest of the year, the show will be every other week through December. So starting on September 14th. I don't have to miss anything else. Just going to miss in 2 weeks. I'm busy that day, that night. So that's number one. Number two, as I always start, the Rhine Research Center in its 90th year is actually having a special lecture this Wednesday, I believe. It'll be on the Rhine website, which is just simply Rhine, RHINE.org. And it's my colleague Nancy Zingroni, who's going to talk a little bit about history and some other really interesting stuff about the field of parapsychology. So join, keep an eye out on the Rhine Center website. Get yourself on the email list so you get notice of upcoming webinars and things. I will be doing one in November from the Rhine. Well, it may or may not be from the Rhine Center. The Rhine Center right now may be moving buildings. We're looking for another space because the owner of the building has sold the building or is selling the building. But I will be doing a webinar on psychics and mediums and basically how to assess a good reading and find a good psychic and all that fun stuff. So that'll be coming up in November, and I'll be promoting that a little bit down the road. But definitely check the Rhine Center out. Again, it's www.rhine.org. You'll find in the channel description, you can find that link and the link to the Education Center, which for which I teach. Just finishing up 2 courses this coming week, and the next courses will start the very beginning of October. And the courses include an advanced investigation course, so you do need to have taken the original field investigations course, kind of level 1, or we have a way around that, but you kind of have to contact me and we have to chat. I'm also teaching a course called Case Studies, Paranormal Case Studies, which is going to look at in-depth, step-by-step through a few of my cases, but also some well-known cases in the history of parapsychology, that really have gotten a lot of people's attention over the years. So those 2 courses are 8-week classes, and I'll also be teaching on Thursday nights. So those will be Mondays and Wednesday nights, and I'll be teaching on Thursday nights a course called People of Parapsychology, putting the spotlight on some really big names within the field, probably not known to people in the ghost hunting world, and what they contributed both to investigations and also to research. So that'll be coming as well. And hi, Melody. Jody, I hope you're cooking something good there. And hi, Tina. Good to see you here. All right, so those are the kind of the promo things I've got right now. And we are, I will say also that for anybody who's read the 2 novels I co-authored, the Rainy and Day investigation novels, Afterlife and Near Death, we do have a 3rd one in process finally. Hoping to get it out by the end of the year. It will be called Farsight and will involve remote viewing. But those are fictional mysteries, somewhat based in reality for that. Tina, you missed live stream because the Baseball Hall of Fame. Well, that's okay. It's perfectly okay. It's a good reason to miss. But, they're all recorded. Just a reminder that all these shows are recorded. So you can always go back and listen to them or watch them or whatever you want to do for that. Please do hit the like, subscribe if you don't already. And I know a lot of you already do. Paul, you enjoyed watching the documentary Parasense. That was a really interesting experiment. So Parasense is a documentary by a buddy of mine named Ross Allison, who started a group up in Seattle many, many years ago probably about 25 to 30 years ago, I think it is, called A Ghost. And he still does investigations from time to time. But it was the original investigations group in Seattle, and he paid attention to parapsychology. And he hooked up with a somewhat kind of more technology kind of guy, and they decided to try something which is a little different. If you haven't seen Parasense, it is available for rental on, and I think it may be actually on Amazon Prime just in general, but it's a little different. His premise, which I don't necessarily completely agree with because there's some piece of it that's missing for what he's doing, but it definitely does bring up some really interesting things, is that, many times ghost hunters go on investigations in places and they feel like they're being touched. And so what he's done with his technology buddy is they've set up some very interesting environmental sensors and some other human sensors, you might say. So sensors that kind of indicate what's going on in the body of a person in a haunted place, and trying to communicate with the ghost just as you normally would try to ask for help or for something. And the difference is that the person is in the dark. That's not that different, but the person is also naked. So that there can be and the reason for the nakedness is to see whether there's a change on the skin, not just a sensation of being touched. So kind of a combination of those two things. And that sort of makes sense, especially if it's psychokinesis. Yeah. So it may not be psychokinesis as we think of it, a physical thing. Having experienced that in a couple of ways, it's hard to know whether that was actually a physical touch or a psychic touch, which feels physical or not. But he did a great job. I mean, they really did controlled stuff, and I really like the way that they were doing the experiments. They had a couple of volunteers to do this. They don't show people that completely naked, so that's not going to happen. That would be the porn version of that. Not sure what that would be called, but yeah, in essence, it's a good experiment, very good experiment in that way. So Ross had me interviewed, and also we did go down to one of the haunted places here in the Bay Area, the Gay 90s pizza place, pizzeria in Pleasanton, California, which is kind of an older haunted place. So thanks for bringing that up, Paul. Sometime in October, I'll be on an episode of The Unexplained as well. So as soon as I know a date, I'll let you all know. Probably hopefully by the next show, we'll know something. I'm glad you liked the Superman movie, Paul. I mean, I've seen it twice. I've been tempted to. I'm holding off from watching it on digital now. It's still in the theaters. I might even go see it in the theaters again. But I have a pre-order on the Blu-ray, so I'll be watching it as soon as I get the Blu-ray from Amazon, which is I think September 23rd. It's a fun movie. As a comic book fan and as a Superman fan, I actually can't understand anyone who is a Superman fan of the comics who thinks that there's something wrong with the movie at all, because it's pretty much out of the comics. But more than that, there's some really interesting emotional elements to that. I think that when we do anything psychically, and anybody does anything psychically, one of the most common things that people experience is picking up other people's emotions. And there was a recent article that I saw, a post oddly by Neil deGrasse Tyson, that I don't know what university it was, has found that the human brain gives off very, very low electromagnetic fields, so signals. We in parapsychology have been looking at low frequency electromagnetics for a while, extreme low frequency waves, and so on. The problem is they can't carry too much information, because when you have a low frequency, you have the wave itself is very, very long, and it's hard to think about how much information you can pack on it. But what his post seemed to be an explanation of how people pick up other people's emotions without being present with them or being, aware with your normal senses. So if that's what empathy is, or what psychic empathy is, that's a good explanation if that's what's really happening. The issue is that consciousness seems to be more than that. But one of the most common psychic experiences is the ability to feel the emotions of other people. And frankly, not enough people do that. It can go bad. I've had several people I've worked with over the years who couldn't go to a crowd, certainly, because they would pick up the emotions of everybody around them, and that would be overwhelming. And I was able to work with them and teach them how to shut that down and open up when they wanted to. Something I teach in one of my classes as well, but that's something that is available to anybody. I have some information about that. But we as normal human beings can pick up emotions both from non-verbal cues when we're facing a person and we're kind of talking to them, if you're open to that sort of thing, and also from kind of the psychic side. Problem is, clearly people are not paying any attention to that because there's definitely a lack of empathy. And some of the folks out there, including Elon Musk, says that empathy is a weakness. And actually, it's a strength. You can't negotiate with somebody unless you know how they feel. Not only how they think, but also how they feel. So that was a pretty interesting thing. If in fact that low electromagnetic frequency or field or radiation is coming off our brains and actually allows us to interact, that might be something connected to how telepathy works, for that matter. Tina, I saw Fantastic Four as well. I enjoyed that. But I have to feel, the one thing, talking about feelings, I came out of Superman with strong feelings, positive feelings, especially that last scene, where he's getting kind of treated with more solar rays and sees all these videos of himself growing up with the Kents. I saw Fantastic Four and I thought it was a good movie, but I didn't have any feeling from it. I mean, I sometimes get some excitement from some of the other Marvel movies, but it's a good movie. That's all I can say about it. So it's a little different. James Gunn knows how to pull the heartstrings, you might say. Kathy, been listening to a lot to how people have recorded EVPs over the years. Explain the old tape record, analog versus spirit boxes, and nowadays. Okay, so electronic voice phenomena started many, many decades ago. Often with reel-to-reel tape, eventually with cassette tapes and other kinds of recording devices. And the whole idea of EVP, by definition, it is an interaction with the device or the recording medium. All right, and ostensibly people think those are spirits doing that. Because we know that living humans can interact with devices, maybe we don't have a lot of good evidence. We have some evidence for recording mediums, especially photography, via psychokinesis. And if a ghost did it, it's still psychokinesis. So it's the same process, different source. It's not always easy. We certainly can't tell where the voice is coming from, but unfortunately, one has to consider a couple of things with EVP. One is how clear it is, and the clarity of that, of course, people talk about Class A and Class B. That's important to note, that it sounds, the voice or the words are the same no matter pretty much who listens to it. And there has been scientific experiments showing that most of the time it's either suggestion. One person hears something in the voice, says something to everybody else, and then they listen and they hear the same thing. It's pattern recognition. Not hearing the same thing is usually because nobody said what it sounds like. So that's one problem. It has to be a very clear EVP. The second thing about electronic voice phenomena is that we might be doing it. The person who is doing the recording for a ghost hunting group, for example, the person who always gets EVP, which I hear about from some ghost hunting groups, that person is either in the process with a spirit or their unconscious is doing it themselves because of expectation. And finally, there is a third piece, which is fitting the response or fitting what you hear to what you think the thing refers to. So you ask a question and you get an answer, get some EVP, and you make it fit. to do an experiment, to do EVP, you have to consider not trying to make that EVP fit. It still could be from a spirit, but I've seen too many examples of people making these things fit, typically. With spirit boxes, the idea is that it depends on what's the process that spirit box is doing. So I've seen two different processes over time. There may be more. One is that the system randomly supposedly scans radio signals and stops as it goes along back and forth on various stations, you might say. The idea for that, by the way, Frank, can't remember Frank's name, which the original Frank's box, can't remember his last name off the top of my head. He got that idea from watching Close Encounters of the Third Kind. If you haven't seen that movie, you should watch that movie, because the aliens affected Richard Dreyfuss's AM radio in his car, and it was going back and forth and coming up with sentences that way. That was the idea for the Frank's box was originally to try to communicate with ETs, not with spirits. That got adapted. So supposedly, spirits will interact with the mechanics of the random systems in those kinds of boxes and have the right words come up or have it stop on the right things for different stations. With those kinds of boxes, there's a lot of making it fit, or interpretation, and multiple interpretation. The other one I've seen is where there are EM sensors on the thing, and it looks at if you have two EM sensors like this far apart, you might have slight variation in the natural electromagnetic fields or the technological electromagnetic fields around us. And it looks at the difference, and that generates a random number, which then picks a word out of a dictionary or a pre-recorded dictionary of some kind. This is what an obelisk sort of does with randomness, and kind of produces something. But you need one that actually you can understand. The initial versions of the obelisk, which worked off a random kind of scanning type thing, it had words programmed in or parts of words, and it created words. And it was so robotic, it was like trying to interpret a garbled EVP in general. So hard to know. And the worst part here, the worst thing I can say to this, and it's not really worse, but we have enormous data from laboratory studies that human beings can affect random systems. Living human beings can. So if you're working off a random system, it could just as in fact, it's more likely if there's no other indication of spirits around, it's more likely it's coming from you. So there have to be some other indications that there's spirits present in order to even try to connect those two things. Same thing with EMF. You get anomalous EMF, that's all it is, until you have something else that says there's a psychic experience, a spirit experience, something else happening here. Last thing I'll just mention is sometimes EVP is coming through from residual information, not from spirits, not from conscious entities at all. Tina, are mirror neurons affected by sensing other beyond visual? I've not seen any research on that at all, so I can't even answer that. I don't believe there's been any other research on that. Maybe there will be with this EM, the low frequency EM at this point. Paul, your friend's grandmother did come. Let's see. You have a typo there. I assume it's come in your house last week. I just attended her funeral. When I see if anything. Oh, okay. I'm not quite sure what that. What's missing there for OMIN, my house. All right. When you see if anything paranormal happens. Not everybody shows up, so it'll be interesting. Mary Prankster, Mary, wouldn't be surprised Lex Luthor also believes that empathy is weakness. Absolutely. I think that was almost part of his tirade at the very, very end of the movie, in fact. And that's pretty common for supervillains in comic books in general. It's also common for sociopaths and a lot of politicians, unfortunately. Let's see. Yanni or Laurel? Okay, I'm not sure what that refers to. What do you think of Jacobo Grinberg's research? I've only become aware of it recently, and I haven't really had a chance to dive into it, so I can't comment on it. Sorry to say I don't know everything, but I'll have to look into that a little bit since you're asking, try to do that before the next time. Oh, Paul, she died in your house. All right, let me just straighten one thing out for everybody. Where someone dies does not at all relate directly to where they show up after death. Again, I'll repeat that. Where someone dies has nothing to do with where someone shows up after death. It can be where they show up if somebody dies in their own house, or let's say they die in a bar that they frequent all the time. If Norm or Cliff from Cheers died at Cheers, I could see them haunting Cheers. But all of the evidence shows that people return because of family, because of connection to their own property or something, a possession they had, or because it's a place that they felt happiest or comfortable in when they were alive. Not because they died in that place. There are plenty of people who die in every big city, and while they're typically not going to show up as ghosts, because most people don't show up as ghosts after death, but if they did, and there are examples of this, it's not where they died, unless where they died is where they lived or partied or did something else, or their family is for that. Okay. Let's see. Jacob Grinberg. Yeah. What are your thoughts on Gary Habermas? I do not know who that is, Paul. I'm not up to date on every researcher who is writing on or researching NDEs. I will recommend a book by Titus Rivas and others called The Self Does Not Die. If you want a number of excellent examples, it's just been, there's a revised edition that just came out. It's a great book. It has won an award from the Parapsychological Association. It covers near-death experiences and some of the best examples of NDEs. Titus Rivas and his colleagues actually do some research in this area. Okay. I don't know if you mentioned, I did not see Life of Chuck. I heard about it. I don't go to the movie theaters much unless it's a special movie. So I'll wait till I can find it on streaming. Looks like an interesting film. Okay, all right. So I assume this guy comes to NDEs from a religious standpoint. Gary Habermas. Yeah, we don't deal with religious aspects of any of that. In science, you have to remove religion, and religion is an overlay over people's experiences, and certainly not something that I would even look at, honestly, to be honest. Okay. Tina, interpreting sounds on EVPs from the same audio clip. Some people hear Yanni, others hear Laurel. Okay, yeah, people will hear different things. Mark McCuzzy did some really good studies on kind of the pareidolia, how we're hardwired for patterns, to find patterns. And one of the studies actually had people listening, a large group of people listening to a single EVP, which wasn't a Class A. They didn't tell them up front. They did not tell them what the EVP said. They asked them to write down what they heard in the EVP. 15% of the people had a close agreement. 85% did not hear anything what that 15% heard. Then they did it again with another EVP. This time up front, they said, here's what we think it says. 85% of the people heard that, 15% did not. So very clearly, suggestion has a big piece to deal with it. I've seen that happen. I remember, and how people interpret EVP sometimes is really interesting. I was out shooting an episode of a TV show, and the host was also a psychic. We're sitting at dinner with the camera guy and the sound guy, and he wants to play this clip for us of an EVP that was something he shot, and on video. He plays it, and he says, before he plays it, he says, it's saying, "Hi, Chris." That was his name. His name was Chris. And he plays it, and the three of us look at each other, and we did not hear that at all. In fact, I didn't hear any words at all. It sounded like gobbledygook to me. And that's a problem. I mean, we have to really think about what's actually going on with those kinds of things. Okay, Self Doesn't Die, second edition. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Yeah, it's a very good book because it covers quite a bit. I can also recommend a book which is kind of an oddball book because the title of the book also matches something else that John Cruth witnessed at the Sci Games event that was held at the University of Virginia, I don't know, a few weeks ago. And that's something called Mindsight. The book Mindsight is by Ken Ring, and it is an NDE related book that covers the NDEs of people who are blind from birth and people who had lost their sight, and how even people who were blind from birth had what they would describe as a visual experience, which is interesting. The other form of mindsight is people being able to see things totally blindfolded. You know, colors of things, objects, things like that. It's apparently something you can learn. The one thing that's important is making sure that people are really not, without even realizing it, if any of you have seen a mentalist do a blindfold act, all I'm going to say is there's always a way to see through a blindfold. There are better blindfolds than others. And actually, as I can tell you, the best way to make sure someone, including yourself, cannot see anything, even the slightest bit of something, is when you close your eyes, put your fingers over your eyes and then try to open your eyelids. It doesn't have to be a heavy touch. It's a very light touch. That's the best blindfold ever. So it's one of those things that if you ever see people doing mindsight, ask them if they can do that. That's something that John is going to talk to the folks about. And, you know, human beings have amazing capacity for other things. There have been people who have been able to learn echolocation, like a bat, through clicks and other things. So we have a lot of aptitude for learning some other, I don't want to call them senses necessarily, but other ways to perceive the world, besides psychically and besides our sensory point as well. In fact, I just picked up a book, got it here, just came in from Amazon. Somebody had recommended to me called Super Senses, the science of your 32 senses and how to use them, because we have multiple senses of touch. We have different sensors. We have multiple senses of taste, but we have other senses as well. And depending on who the researcher is, they've identified magnetic sense for some people. We know certain animals have them. There's certainly the sense of time, duration. Our body clocks kind of do help us with that. There's different ways we sense things as well. Liz, they use a mask called a Mindfold. It has black foam around the edges. Yeah, I've actually got one that's got, I bought one because I get a little bit of light in my bedroom in the mornings, so I'll sometimes put that on. And it's got memory foam, and it does very well conform. But unless I position it right to begin with, I can still see down here. So it's important to really make sure. And actually, those soft masks, I know that some of the Mindfolds that are sold have a hard plastic with foam. It's actually better. The soft masks are better, I think, as long as they're positioned right for that. And it's not because I wouldn't trust the people doing that. It is the fact that we really want to make sure that their sight is cut off completely, because there can be subliminal stuff that's filtering through otherwise. So it's for research purposes that has to come up. That's important. And Paul, yes, Dean Radin is coming out with a new book, kind of related to his book Real Magic that he wrote a while back. You know, kind of relating the traditions of magic, kind of doing spells and things like that, and mainly rituals. To psychic stuff, because the fact is that rituals can help people get into altered states of consciousness, magic or otherwise. And the window dressing doesn't really make much difference. But you're creating a platform, you might say, or an environment in which psi can come through. ESP, psychokinesis, things like that, even spiritual contact can come through. And that's because of belief as much as anything else. So there are different kinds of rituals people do, whether it's altered states or otherwise. But you want to look at the history of magic. I mean, Dean's book is really good. I'll mention a book. There's, of course, Western magic, and there's, of course, Eastern magic as well, different traditions of ancient traditions of magic. You have the more magical Kabbalah, the Kabbalistic tradition, which goes back over 1,000 years. There are other traditions the Sufis have in Islam. There's many other different traditions and different practices as well. That's there. Liz, yours cuts over nasal passage, breathing more than you like. Yeah, I recommend getting a sleep mask that has memory foam that allows you to open your eyes as well. And there's also some other ones too. I have another one that's really interesting. It's got foam and such, and it's a little harder on the outside than a fabric one. But I'm a side sleeper, and that's where it's a huge buckle. So if I'm on my side, it kind of presses into my head. So you also have to, if you're sleeping with it, you have to make sure you get one that's comfortable. But none of the fabric ones I've seen have cut off any nasals, and it doesn't put pressure here. It should just simply attach, just cut off any light that's there. That's the thing you want to do. There used to be something, and every once in a while it pops up. You can do a little research on something called dermo-optic perception, which may very well have been mindsight, actually, the way it's defined today. The idea of dermo-optic perception is that someone could see things with their fingertips by touch. So you could touch a dollar bill and read the serial number or read a book. The best example in fiction I can think of for that is the Daredevil comic books, because once Daredevil became blind from being hit with the radioactive stuff as a kid, he not only had kind of a radar sense, but also the ability to touch things and read any book. His fingers are so sensitive, he could pick up the lettering on any book, not just on Braille type stuff. So that's dermo-optic perception, the idea of touching a different color card, knowing what it is. Mindsight's a little different than that. No touch necessary for that. Let's see. Paul, just watched the TV show Ghost Hunters. Can't believe people think it's real and informative. Paul, I'm sorry to say that there's a lot of people that think reality TV is actual reality. But then again, my uncle Larry Auerbach was a soap opera director almost all his career, his working life. And he directed most of Love of Life. I mean, he took a vacation here and there, but he directed that soap opera from beginning to end. He was a director occasionally on One Life to Live and All My Children. And sadly, I was an extra on one episode of All My Children and got to talk to Susan Lucci quite a bit. He had told me stories from the actors, and I also heard this from Susan Lucci, of viewers who think the actors are actually their characters. And this happens with movies too. It happens with well-known actors. The goofy version of this is Star Trek fans who ask really minute questions about stupid stuff on the episode. There was a great Saturday Night Live episode, and I'm sure that the clip is there, when William Shatner years ago hosted the show. And the episode, I think the segment is called, on SNL, is Get a Life, because it was based on something Shatner actually said at a Star Trek convention. When people were asking him, Star Trek fans, the real nerdy ones, I can't even think they're nerdy, they were above, kind of like the characters in Galaxy Quest, the fans in Galaxy Quest, thinking that this was all real. Asking questions about things like, what was the code for something, or what in that particular episode, or what was the combination of the safe that you use, just really silly things. And he had to tell them to get a life, because none of that was real, and the character didn't have that in the script. So people watch the reality show thinking that that's what happens. It's a real shame. This is about people not necessarily questioning, and just because it's labeled reality does not mean it is reality. It is not. It is edited. It is directed. I mean, I've had personal experience in this sort of thing. I know from talking to people dealing with other reality shows. I mean, I'll give you an example that if you ever watch Real Housewives and the group gets into an argument and it starts yelling with people, they're yelling at each other and possibly maybe even throwing stuff, odds are, very much odds are that that's not what actually started. What actually started was an argument. And the director or producer who was on hand said, "Oh, this is great. Let's start all over. It's a natural. The argument was real initially, but now it's going to be boosted with yelling and screaming, maybe throw something, because they're directed to do that. Reality TV is not reality. Documentaries even are edited, and they're edited to the storyline that the creator, the director, the producer, somebody wants to actually end up with. I grew up in the TV industry because my dad and my uncle, and seen a lot of stuff behind the scenes, and it's just, even news is not manipulated but edited. If you watch The Daily Show, you'll see a lot of examples that they have found of how things are edited to detriment or support of an individual politician, for example, because they find the original footage as well. Liz, you had sleep paralysis happen with the mask on. That was unfortunate. Yeah, you got to try it again. Sleep paralysis happens because you're coming out of the dream state, REM sleep, and your body hasn't fully come out of the natural sleep paralysis we're in when we're dreaming. So I don't know. The mask might have triggered something like waking up too early or something, but not that likely. So if it only happened once, I try a mask again. But yeah, sleep paralysis is unfortunate the way it's talked about. I've woken up with my arm or my leg just kind of dead to the world, and that's again a form of sleep paralysis. I haven't actually had the experience of having something on my chest, but I haven't had the experience of my torso not waking up when I come out of a dream state. So it just varies quite a bit. All right, what else we got today? Let me mention another segment on SNL that if you have not seen it, you must. Put in SNL Most Haunted into YouTube. Hugh Laurie portrayed Derek Acora, for any of those of you who know the Most Haunted British TV show. It is not only one of the best parodies of ghost hunting type things, because it's true in some respects. It really kind of brings up the issues, but it's also one of the funniest things I've ever seen on SNL. I mean, I've seen it dozens of times. I've used it in lectures and things like that. It's absolutely hysterical. Kathy, have you ever been impressed by an EVP? Yeah, I've been impressed by a couple. That the people who did the EVPs, who actually provided them, were good researchers. There's a couple of Al Rauber, who is a researcher who specializes in EVP. He's an investigator. He actually, his real job before he retired was working for a hearing aid company. He was an acoustical engineer, sound engineer. And he had really great analysis. A guy named Garrett Husfeth, who is no longer with us, was actually a digital forensics expert, often analyzing audio recordings for law enforcement, Department of Justice. And he could tell in his analysis, when he would take what a purported EVP, or even one he got, whether or not it was electronically created, meaning in the device itself, which would indicate an EVP unless it's been manipulated, let's say a fake, or it was an actual sound that was recorded. So he could tell that. And one of the folks I worked with for a while until she passed away, had a friend who was a major audio engineer for motion pictures. And we did a little analysis, and it was interesting, an EVP that we got on a investigation in Florida, that there were really interesting indicators that this was not a normal human sound. Let's put it that way. And it was definitely not acoustical, because none of the other devices recorded it for that. So that's one thing we have to look at. And then I've also been in situations where there was one case that we did for TV that unfortunately never aired. Chris Fleming and I were involved in the show, and a couple of other folks as well. And we got an EVP after a couple of the crew had an experience in this house during the day. And Chris took a simple Olympic recorder. He asked a question. He recorded 15 seconds with everybody being quiet. He played it back, and there was a voice directly responding to the question. Did it again, happened again. Everyone in the control room, because we were shooting this and we actually had a full production situation, everybody heard the same thing. I mean, I checked. I had everybody write it down. They all heard the same thing. So it was pretty interesting. There have been a couple other times too, but otherwise, I need to know what the controls are. I need to know, and one of the best controls you can do if you want to do EVP is to have 2 recorders running at the same time. So hopefully the time code is the same. And if one device gets a voice and the other does not, you now know it is not an acoustical sound that you just simply didn't hear yourself. All right, then you could take the analysis a step further. But then there's the issue of what does it say? And is it being made to fit? That you have to kind of avoid as much as possible. I recommend a book called Paracoustics by, my brain is free, it's just screwing up right now. Paracoustics is a great book by Cal Cooper and Steve. My brain is going blank right now. I'd have to go look at it on the. I'll get the name here in a minute. You know, it's been a long day for me today, so. Okay, so the author is. Why am I not seeing who? There it is. Steve Parsons. I don't know why I wasn't thinking of it. So Stephen T. Parsons and Callum Cooper. They have another book coming out called Parasight, S-I-G-H-T, about video, audio. But Paracoustics is like, that should be your Bible if you're going to do anything related to sound. Steve also wrote a book called Ghostology, which is about the technical side, tech and stuff like that, and how to properly use different pieces of equipment as well. Okay, let's go back here and see what else we got. Let's see, Paul Narika, thank you for doing this. Does the parapsychological community have any collective opinions about Casey doing it? Yeah, you know, it varies. Not everybody in the field has looked into Casey's stuff. Edgar Casey's a really interesting situation a case where we have all the data. I mean, every reading he did, even for people who wrote into him, was recorded and transcribed. I mean, he had a stenographer there. So the ARE actually, you can if you join the ARE, you have access to all of those transcripts. They actually put them out years ago on CD as well, searchable, so people could look for things. And that itself is really interesting. I think that Casey, I mean, I believe that Casey had real ability. I think a lot of the folks in the field do. Certainly Eileen Garrett, another great psychic who worked with people, researchers in the field, felt something positive about Casey as well. And I think that the next step would be really interesting to apply a large language model, some AI, to all those transcripts and see what the patterns are and see where we can kind of pull something out in relation to ESP. The problem is that the transcripts don't tell you whether things were verified or not. So, but I do know that a lot of the folks where he did either a reading that was then given to someone, there was positive feedback on those as well. Okay, Liz, you were at the Psy Games and just felt something sit next to you, was touching you, which is awkward. You were sharing a room with a guy. Awkward. He wasn't in the room. Probably wasn't him. When you have a lot of people trying to do psychic stuff, especially the number that I heard was there, it's kind of like putting out on a searchlight. There might have been some local bodiless folks, I'll put it that way, who decided to drop in. And you were just simply capable of picking up their presence in that way. And Liz, thank you for a little bit of that as well. So, we have a lot of data in parapsychology, and I've been, because of work, my current job, I'm kind of playing with AI quite a bit. And I just want to say that we may know a lot more about patterns of being psychic and everything else once we can get all the data into a large language model, into an AI, and apply that. Unfortunately, not everything has been scanned and uploaded. We don't have digitized records for all the experiences people wrote in. Uh, Louisa Rhine, J.B. Rhine's wife, who is mainly focused on people's experiences outside the lab. J.B. Rhine was focused on the lab work. She was focused on people's outside the labs. She took, at one point in the 50s, she took, I think it was something like close to 30,000 letters that had been written in people's experiences, written into the Duke Parapsychology Lab. She went through them all. She parsed them out, ended up with 15,000 that had enough detail about the experiences where you could identify, is it possibly telepathy, is it precognition, psychokinesis, is it an apparitional experience, that kind of thing. And she found the patterns. She went through that. So she was the AI, you might say, the large language model for that. Taking that data, if it was actually digitized, would be really interesting to see whether or not we find the same patterns, or as people in other fields of science are finding, when you apply these models to a specific set of data, you can get answers out of it that would normally have taken you 10 years, and it comes out in, at the most a day or two, depending on the way it's actually been asked. So we have, as much, whatever people think about AI, and of course you have to be careful about AI that's based on the internet, because you end up with some fake stuff coming through. I've seen some really weird things when I've asked. They've gotten better. Originally asked, my test originally was who is Lloyd Auerbach, and because I'm the only one. And several of the models, like originally ChatGPT was okay but not great. The predecessor to Google, Gemini, was Bard, and it was terrible. There were so many. I couldn't even figure out where in the world they got the information about me. Because there were things like that I grew up in Chicago, and the only thing I could think of is I went to college outside of Chicago in Evanston at Northwestern, and there was an assumption, but you can find stuff on the internet that says where I was born. I mean, all of the facts that they got wrong were an easy fix, and anyone who did a regular Google search would have gotten a better hit than the AI did. They've gotten better, they learn, but they still go out to most of them still go out to the general internet, and you do have to verify facts, much like Wikipedia, which is not always accurate. In fact, it often is inaccurate because of the way it's set up. So I'm encouraged by what's happening in technology in that way, and how we can apply it to our understanding of all this stuff down the road. At the very least, it's helped me get things to sign books with. So I have new ways to put my signature on a book when I go to a book signing. It can be very creative. You can put together a lot of fun stuff with that. All right, we still have about 12 minutes left. Anybody have any interesting questions or topics they want me to switch to? All right. Then maybe since there's nothing coming through right now, maybe what I'll do is talk about something I've talked about to my students this past week in my Developing Intuition course. A lot of people go to see tarot card readers, or enjoy playing with tarot cards and other oracles themselves. And I had a couple people who mentioned in my classroom that they were tarot readers. I've seen a lot of people out there, even at psychic fairs over the years, not that I go to them that much anymore, but they pretty much had memorized all the meanings of the cards from the books on the cards. And to me, if that's all they're going to say, you might as well just, buy a book and buy a deck of tarot cards and do it yourself. All right, Graveyard, I'll stop. And Graveyard Guard, you have a question. What's your question? I'm waiting. All right, when you're ready, put the question in. Oh, there we go. Is that bounty on the shark in cash or check? I assume that's what you're asking. Which shark? All right. So let me continue with what I was saying here while I'm waiting. Oh, I thought you were talking about Jaws. Yeah, Jaws is in its 50th anniversary. I know that. All right, so I just want to suggest to folks, because I have played with different types of oracle cards. Some of you may not know, unless you read my bio, that I also perform mentalism, psychic entertainment. mind reading for fun and profit as a performer for entertainment purposes. And on occasion, I have worked at parties doing card readings. And I haven't used tarot cards, although you can see some decks of tarot cards behind me because I like to collect different tarot cards. I use a deck that I discovered years ago, which is hard to find these days, called Psy cards, like PSY. And they're similar to tarot cards. I'm just going to use these as an example of what I came to here. And I've now applied it to tarot and other things as well, other oracles as well. So the cards there are some that are very similar to tarot cards. There's actually cards like a Tower and the Fool and things like that, the ones that are pretty well known. There is a Death card, but there's also a Birth card. And my line when I'm using these cards typically is, if the Death card comes up, death means the end of something. I said, and typically I get a better reaction from women, obviously, in this, but I said the scarier card is the Birth card. And usually I get a chuckle from most women on that. Because you don't take these literally, you interpret them in different ways. And what I started doing, what I found it's less work for me in some respects. And I encourage anybody who's doing tarot readings or any kind of card readings at all, and maybe even other kinds of oracle readings, that if you shuffle the cards multiple times and then spread them out face down, and the person you're reading for, you tell them, think of a question. What do you want to know? And have them move their hand back and forth over the cards and tell them when you're ready, just let your finger drop and pull a card if it feels right. And do that 3 or 4 or 5, however many cards you want to use. What I found were two really interesting things in many of the parties that I was doing. In fact, all the parties I did when I've used these cards had one thing in common I'll get to in a moment. But most of the time, the cards that were pulled answered the question. Before we turn over the cards, I say, what was your question? They'd say the question, they'd look at the cards, they'd look at me, and I'd say that at least half the time they'd say thank you, because they knew the answer right from the cards. Wouldn't be the same with tarot cards. You'd have to explain a little bit of what the cards mean. The other half of the time, I would just based on their question, I could interpret those cards. It's really easy to do that. So what's happening there is as they're thinking of the question, it looks like they're using their own ESP to find the cards that answer their question. Because we know our future better and we know ourselves better than anyone else can do a reading for us. So that's worth. The other thing that happened, which was really interesting, is that there was a theme for the gathering, the party. So I'll give you 2 examples. One was a retirement party for a woman who had been the receptionist for a construction company. And the cards were shuffled in between. I think I did readings for about 30 people. I had a good friend of mine was there because he wanted to learn what I was doing too. And interestingly enough, of the cards, because I was doing 3 card readings for everyone, with one person who was an exception, every one of the people, even the cards, after the cards were shuffled, again, cards are face down, they're picking the cards, every single person picked this card. The Tower. Now, if that doesn't represent building, which was a construction company, I don't know what does. The one exception to this was really interesting. It was the daughter of one of the folks working there, and she came in, she was goth, black everything, and thought the whole thing was just goofy. And so when I did the reading, when she pulled the card, she pulled Death, Destruction, and the Beast. And she said, I've had other card readings. This is the best reading I've ever had. Go figure. That was one example. My friend Mark, who actually started doing readings with these same cards and even other cards, we found the same thing going on if you let people pick the cards. I'm trying to find the one card for the other example. So the other example was an advertising company. And let's see, do I even have, there it is. And it was a Christmas party, and I was doing readings just like for 4 hours. People come by, it was very noisy, a lot of music. Every person I did the reading for, same way, 3 cards, pick them yourself. Every single person picked this card, the Beast. Every single one of those employees said, "That's my boss." And then the boss sits down for a reading and he pulls the card, and it was also the beast. So you can have kind of a group undercurrent of themes, and also some really interesting things happen when people pick their own cards. So Melody, you're asking, can a person do their own tarot reading? Absolutely. I would suggest doing it this way. It's, again, shuffle the cards multiple times, spread them out face down. You feel for the cards that feel right to you and pull them. Don't just turn over the top cards. That's normally what happens is people, the person cuts the card, you start turning over the top cards. This way, there's a potential for actual psychic interaction from the person getting the reading. The other way, you have to hope that the cards are triggering something psychic in the reader. Not all tarot card readers are actually psychic, because a lot of people just do them for fun. And there are all sorts of other oracles you can get out there. I mean, there's tons of different ways. I mean, there's oracles in every culture. They're not always cards. There's things like runestones and dice and reading the bones and all sorts of stuff that you can play with. And if you're doing tarot, find your favorite tarot card deck. I mean, you probably can't see what they are. I have a Ghostbusters deck. I have a DC Comics deck, Sleepy Hollow deck right back here. I've got a deck called Food Fortunes, which takes the tarot and turns it into like main course, dessert, appetizer, soup, things like that. It's kind of a fun thing for that. I've got some other ones. I have a couple Star Trek decks. I've got a bunch of other decks here, and I just got a different Oracle deck. I'm just going to show you this because I'm going to recommend it. It's not a cheap deck, but it's called the Golden Age Oracle. And it's not a tarot deck. It's very easy if you wanted to do readings. Again, I would do this, and I'm going to be doing this if I do parties. With this deck, I will be doing it the same way, spreading the cards, letting the people find them. And I'll tell you where to find this here in a moment. So the cards, there's 100 cards, and these are all vintage photos that have been possibly, in some instances, I can see there's been photoshopped or altered a bit to match a meaning. In other aspects, they're just straight on. But they're vintage photos. That's the Golden Age. This is a family card. So each one says what it is and gives you a few notes. Like this one for family says home, roots, nurture, unity bond, support, things like that. They all have that kind of thing. This is from the Arcane Studio. The Arcane Studio on Etsy. So if you go to Etsy, and you put in The Arcane Studio, it's all one word. I'll put it in here. You'll see the guy has, Sean has this deck and several others. There's some other bizarre decks as well. And again, they're not cheap, but they're really, really, really cool set of cards. And as somebody who collects these kinds of things, I can see using them, and people have looked at them, have been really amazed. It's just a really well done deck of cards. There's other ones out there too, obviously. All right, so we're down to the last minute. Mary Prankster, you like the Tarot of Marseille? Yeah. I'd also suggest you go to artisantarot.com. They have a great spread of tarot cards they sell and ones that they produce as well, and other kinds of cards too. All right, just as a reminder, the next session, next show for Ask Professor Paranormal will be in 3 weeks. We're skipping an extra week. It's just so I can align a calendar so I don't have to miss anything due to travel plans in the fall. So that's going to be September 14th, followed by September 14th and September 28th. And then we'll go into October. Again, it's going to be every other week for the rest of the year, barring anything bizarre that happens. Okay, and one day as an experiment, you should read the letter to some lucky people in the chat. I'm not sure which letter that is. All right, everybody take care. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. And have a great Labor Day weekend. Tell your friends. Take care. Bye-bye.